Gents, switching gears, focusing now on the Premier League Summer Series in the USA. What have we learned? Because there have been some great games around the country. It's been epic so far. I mean, Nick, you were on site for that Goal Fest in Philly over those 3 games. We had Miggy Almiron scoring back at home in Atlanta. Nick, what are your thoughts so far on the Summer Series and what we've seen from these teams? Because there's been a lot of rotation. We've seen a lot of new players. We've seen some new ideas, but it's just been really positive vibes from all 6 teams who have been involved in this competition so far.
Yeah, it was just good to watch. I mean, that was, and I don't mean that like, oh, I'm throwing that out there as an excuse. I mean, like it was good to watch. This was
the intensity levels were really high.
Yes, there was. I mean, let's not say there were huge stakes in it, but there was a desire to win, and I think some of that happens because these teams have so much to prove. I spoke to a bunch of the guys at Brighton, Adam Lallana, Danny Welbeck, Dennis Undav, all of them were asked, whether by me or by somebody else. So, I mean, this year, what are the goals? People basically giving them an opportunity to say, yeah, it's going to be fun to experience Europe, and we just hope we have a good year. They believe, under Roberto De Zerbi, that they're going to win, and they might win the Europa League. Like, they're setting their goals high. And so between them and Villa and Newcastle, and the fact that Chelsea is at least trying to put out their confidence, you had a bunch of teams with their feathers up, their tails up, if you will, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it's been incredible. Like I said, the intensity is really, really close, I feel like, to the Premier League level, which obviously there's 6 Premier League teams, but we all know that in some of these preseason games and tournaments, it isn't replicated. But that's been my big takeaway from watching these games. There's been an edge to it, and a lot of these teams, like you mentioned, Nick, coming off great seasons. Brentford, Fulham, Villa, Newcastle, obviously Brighton. There's a lot of positivity amongst these teams about, okay, like you said as well, we're not happy with what we did last year. It was great for a lot of those teams. It was some of their best ever performances in the Premier League in history, and they want to get better, and they want to finish even higher and excel in Europe as well. So I think this is going to be a really important part of their progress under these very talented managers, and to have a tough preseason in the States with the humidity and the heat and playing these intense games early on, it has to be a huge positive for them. Andy, what are your takeaways, and any players or teams kind of impressed more than we thought? Because Nicholas Jackson at Chelsea, to me, he seems like one heck of a player, and he nearly went to Bournemouth in January, picked up an injury, hung around at Villarreal, was brilliant at the end of the La Liga season, and he just carried that on straight away. And my goodness, he looks like a Maurizio Pochettino player, doesn't he?
Yeah, unfortunately, he does. He certainly does. To piggyback on Nick's point there a little bit, like we have seen over the last few years, we saw it in baseball a long time ago, and they always said, well, players used to show up for spring training to get in shape before the season started. Now they show up in fully in shape to essentially start the regular season a month early, and the intensity and just the way that they go about the daily grind. We've seen that now, I think, in the soccer world, and specifically with these teams coming over for the Premier League Summer Series, is they showed up ready to play on day, maybe not ready to defend on day one, but they showed up ready to play and to put on a show, and the intensity has been there from the very beginning. And so we've essentially just extended the season a month earlier into the summer, because these players are showing up in peak shape and peak performance, and putting on really good shows. And speaking of really good shows, I fear that Maurizio Pochettino is going to have a lot of success at Chelsea, and that is going to be very difficult to stomach, and very difficult to witness week in and week out, season after season. It's a young team. It's a lot of young players who have aspirations of getting to the very highest level of the game. And that is the perfect type of Maurizio Pochettino player. That there's a lot of athleticism, there's a lot of quickness, there's a lot of energy in that Chelsea team, I think. And those might be 3 words that, if you think back to Chelsea last season, not a lot of any of those. And so obviously all the new players brought into the squad have made a difference. But I think the new manager, the new mindset, the new philosophy, the new way of working every single day, I think is going to fit perfectly with all the transfer business that we did. We laughed, oh, they spent so much money on so many players, they couldn't all change in the changing room together. And now they brought in a manager who I think is probably the perfect coach for them. And so get ready for Chelsea to be good again, I believe.
And the reason Andy says that with a pained expression is because he's a Tottenham fan, of course, because he had so many great years watching Pochettino at Spurs. And I think you're right. I like what I'm seeing from them so far this summer in the summer series. Nick, your final big takeaway from being down in Philly, you obviously wrote a great piece over at Pro Soccer Talk and NBCSports.com, plugging sort of the atmosphere and the vibe from that weekend and telling us what it was like on the ground to see fans from all over the US heading to Philly and getting to see their team in the flesh, which was such a buzz for them. Was there one big takeaway or one favorite moment for you other than meeting a Brentford fan actually called Brent Ford, which was brilliant?
No, there were so many cool stories. There was a gentleman there, another Brentford fan, whose father passed 3 months before they were promoted, and so they had a flag with his name on it as well. And you realize the sort of tradition and feeling that comes from these teams. And watching, I guess the number one thing I found was finding out who every team's favorite player was. There would just, when they get on the ball, you hear this little buzz. And it was Alexander Isak or Bruno with Newcastle, or Ollie Watkins, or by the way, it was probably Emi Buendia because he had the game of his life at one point in the year. Or João Pedro. You forget about the new toy, and these are Brighton fans seeing him for the first time and doing very well. I just got that buzz the whole time, and I was fortunate enough to be on the field, right there before the game, an experience I've never had. And I remember thinking, all right, this is awesome, but when I leave Philadelphia, can we just start match week 1 tomorrow? Because that would be sick.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. For even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock and be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend on USA Network and on Peacock. We will see you over there.